Hey there guys, I want to begin this video with something that unfortunately I'm sure is going to be an unpopular take, even though I think it should be extremely popular. I think more people should be participating in this, but tomorrow is the 4th of July. In the United States, that is known as Independence Day. It's supposed to be a celebration of freedom. I personally will not be partaking in this event. I actually haven't in past years for the most part. Like, I might see family or something, but I haven't celebrated what it stands for, much to the chagrin of a lot of elder family members of mine and just people that I know. The reason I don't is because it feels like such a lie. Beyond like the capitalism side of it and all that stuff, it feels like a lie because let's think about it in terms of this year. So tomorrow the streets will be filled with people who look like me, celebrating, shooting fireworks, eating burgers, enjoying themselves, enjoying the freedom we've been afforded just for being born looking a certain way, having a certain skin tone, having a certain ethnic background. We never had to work for any of that. We never had to work for the basic necessities like being able to go to a school, being able to participate in whatever religious celebrations that we wanted to, especially if you were, born into a Christian family, which many of us were, even though a lot of us have broken free since then. It seems strange that people are going to be behaving that way when at the exact same time, on the exact same day, the streets will also be filled with thousands upon thousands of indigenous United States people who are screaming, who are crying, who are mourning the lost lives of children. Now, unfortunately, when you talk about social justice issues, especially things like police brutality or the fact that a group of people has been harmed or killed, you have people who tend to try to make excuses for it when it comes to adults. It's always something like, oh, if he had only complied with police, oh, if she had only done this differently or that differently. There's no reason for it, in my opinion, but if it's an adult, chances are people will try to make an excuse for the person who is the assailant in the situation. However, in cases like this, these were children. These were very small children, some of them babies, some of them toddlers. There is no excuse you can make for that. There is nothing a child of that size, of that weight, of that age could have possibly done to become an active threat against an adult human being. There was no reason for any of it. It's disgusting. And on top of the fact that they're gone now and they're only just now being discovered and some of them being sent home, there's also the issue of why it was able to happen. The fact that these children were effectively kidnapped from their homes and taken to places they did not want to be and told, you are not allowed to have any semblance of who you were anymore. You need to conform or you will die. So that, as an aside, is a reason why I will not be celebrating tomorrow, and I encourage all of you to also not participate in celebrating the freedoms that we've been awarded that many people have not. Now, that leads me into something I think is very important to discuss on the witch side of YouTube. I don't know how many people will be talking about this, but I think it's important to be discussing on the 4th, which is why I'm waiting until the 4th to upload this video. And that is the fact that a lot of witches, not all of them, but a lot of witches are neo-pagan. You do not have to be pagan to be a witch, but I am pagan. A lot of people I know who are witches are also pagan. And unfortunately, similar to many non-Christian religious practices, over the centuries, paganism's more or less been wiped out. There are bits and pieces in art and artifacts that we've found that help us kind of create an image of what life was like for pagans at their height. And we have stories by word of mouth, but I mean, we've all played a game of telephone in our time. We all know that by the time you get through even 10 people, that story has changed quite a lot, even though everyone was pagan at the time, not everyone would have had morals and ethics that perfectly aligned with one another. So you could have had one person in a clan telling a story, you know, of their mythology or their beliefs, and then the next person decides, well, I'm going to embellish that a little bit because that doesn't quite fit what I believe in. And then you have another person who goes, yeah, well, I'm going to take these parts out because I don't really like that part of the story. Like with word of mouth, that happens. And on top of it, then you go, oh, well, there's things like the prose Edda and the poetic Edda, so we do have some of it written down. Well, by the time paganism was able to be written down by people, those people had been heavily Christianized. So even with written paganism, you have to take it with a grain of salt, which is why a lot of people are considered either neo-pagans now or reconstructionist pagans. We're taking what we do know based on what we've found archaeologically speaking and trying to formulate a picture, as well as pulling it into, you know, today's world, modern society, making it work for what we experience now. And that's a beautiful thing. It's wonderful to be able to reclaim your heritage, to reclaim your culture and the beliefs of your family that have been wiped out for centuries. But with it also comes some issues. Some of the issues that have arisen from Reconstructionist paganism are things like Wicca and eclectic paganism or eclectic witchcraft. Now, on its own, eclectic witchcraft or eclectic paganism is not necessarily a bad thing. All that literally means is that you don't fit snugly into a box. It means maybe you like some aspects of Norse paganism, but it doesn't perfectly fit the way you wish it would, so maybe you also take a couple scraps from Celtic paganism and so on and so on. You're kind of squishing different bits together to formulate something that works better for you, and that's beautiful. You're learning about many different cultures that way, many different belief systems. You're not allowing them to die out. But what can also come with that that's more negative is the fact that it can get muddled, which is kind of what happened to Wicca. A lot of people are waking up and realizing that Wicca is a really harmful practice at its root. Now, does this mean that everyone who practices Wicca is bad? Absolutely not. Wicca, like any other belief and practice, is what you make it into. It's what you want it to be. It's how you choose to practice it, which means that people are free to take the aspects they think are positive of Wicca and practice those, but leave the negative aspects at the door, which is great. Regardless, as someone who is eclectic pagan, I am one of those people who doesn't really fit in a box. I am one of those people that pulls from different pagan beliefs to formulate my own. I can say that there's been muddling of history, and with that came a lot of accidental appropriation. With Wicca especially, but also with any eclectic witchcraft or eclectic paganism, there have been issues where over time we did not realize that some of our practices came from indigenous practice or from voodoo or something else as a closed practice that is none of our business to be doing. Everyone like myself, we did not realize that some of our practices came from closed practice. And I, funny enough, have TikTok to thank for shedding light on that for me. And as I was learning what certain things like, you know, smudging and white sage and everything like that meant to indigenous people, I was disgusted by just how many beginner-based pagan and witchcraft books out there encourage people to partake in these closed practices. A lot of us don't have a starting point. We don't have someone in our life who can just teach us these ways. A lot of people who are new to witchcraft and new to paganism tend to just go off and buy some books that people recommend online, read them, and then take a lot of their practice from that. And while, you know, reading books and learning from books is great, it's frightening just how many of them have closed practice in them. And it's gotten to a point where you almost can't trust the books anymore. I've learned more from just listening to different types of witches on YouTube and on TikTok than I have from any book I've ever read or any article online, and it's because of how much misinformation was being spread. Now, I know some people listening to this won't understand what's the big deal. Why are people so upset if, you know, people are using this if it's not in like a coven or something, like they're independent practitioners? It's not like they're dragging anyone else into it, so who cares? Well, there's a couple reasons it's still bad. One is that it is still closed. Whether you're doing it only privately or you're involving other people, it doesn't matter. It's still a closed practice, which means it is not yours to participate in without initiation. If you go through everything you are supposed to and you are invited in by someone of that culture, that's different. But many of us have not been. Many of us don't even know many people of those cultures, and that's a problem because it's stealing something from a marginalized group, and haven't we done enough of that? The other issue is the fact that, say that no one even knows that you're using like white sage and smudging, for example, in your private practices because you don't share those with anyone. Well, an issue, even though it's private and no one's ever going to know about it, is that because it's closed practice and it's from a culture other than your own, you don't actually know how to properly use that ritual, which means you're opening yourself up to something that could harm your practice. You're opening yourself up to, you know, accidentally doing something you don't mean to do because you haven't been invited into learning why that practice exists in the first place. But yeah, there's more that could be said about this, obviously, but that's, you know, the majority of why I wanted to get out today. And I just think that instead of arguing with marginalized groups in witchcraft and getting upset when you realize that you've made a mistake and that you've been accidentally appropriating, which, like, I'm sure further back in my own channel here in my old witchy videos that at some point I probably mentioned something like smudging by accident because I didn't know any better. And this is me holding myself accountable for that, and that's what you do. Don't get upset, don't get defensive, don't argue with the person from that group. Instead, just be like, I honestly had no idea this was bad, I had no idea that this was stealing, I'm not interested in doing things like this anymore, and so I'm going to grow and change and do something else instead. It's that simple. I don't understand why people get so butthurt and upset and decide to just scream at the people like, I'm going to do what I want. Like, there's so many other ways to cleanse a space. Why do you absolutely have to smudge? That's so stupid. That's just entitlement, not you actually needing something for your practice. But I digress. So, do something that makes you happy today, so long as you're not harming anyone else, and I will see all of you again soon.